Hi, good morning, and welcome to the ZP vlog and podcast. So we like to do this vlog and podcast once a week, and it's really just not answering questions, but it's really just giving a news update from ZP for the week. So I know many of you know, but I will say it, that every week ZP does do a webinar answering technical questions that come in during the week. We tend to do this on a Thursday, and these days we also seem to be doing it on a Sunday as well. It's just dealing with the list of questions. Some interesting questions on Thursday this week. One was about copper deposition. We have a calculator online that allows people to kind of pass a certain amount of current and therefore calculate theoretically how much copper they could deposit. But with that kind of calculation, there's so many assumptions. You can only give people an estimate or ballpark, what they're adding to the copper, the state of that copper bath, the sort of geometric setup of it. It's all too many parameters, but we do that. That said, we did go on to talk about copper stripping voltammetry, cyclic stripping voltammetry, or cyclic voltammetric stripping voltammetry, which actually allows people to actually measure the copper in a bath. Well, that's kind of of industrial interest. If people are going to do copper plating, then they should really know how much copper is in there, and the SensiAll platform for ZP allows that to be measured. We did talk about lactate monitoring, which is interesting because I realized today in a webinar we also talked about lactate monitoring as well. When you look at ZP, I think the first three sensors along our sort of biosensor were glucose, oxygen, and lactate, which kind of reflects the three sensors that we first of all did. We did answer a question about aspartame. I said to these people, aspartame is actually addressable by an electrochemical biosensor. You've identified an enzyme called phenylpyruvate. The only catch in is it seems to need a phosphate anion. And so if you try to make an in vitro product, that might not be so readily available. But, that said, they can do some in vitro. If they want to do an in vivo product, it would be a problem because there may not be that much phosphate kicking around. But if they were doing in vitro work in a phosphate buffer solution, they should be fine. Somebody else is a client of ours, so I was just helping them understand how to plug into a PalmSense potentiostat. That was an easy one. And then I also talked about functionalizing a screen printed electrode to be an immunosensor. We have something called the Carbon 501, which has got a circular electrode on it. It's been a long time coming, but we do have it, and it allows people to easily pipette onto it. Some other news from ZP this week. As you can see, that was quite an intense technical webinar this week. We do get a lot of inquiries around wearables. Generally say that ZP, you've got large companies, like Abbott, that does a CGM, a continuous glucose monitor. They have probably 55,000 employees globally. So they would have by hours the most experience distributed over 55,000 people. But you've probably got one of the most intense experiences when it comes to wearable microneedle technology. So we did put a bit of a landing page about that. Where's the microneedles? Where's the electronics? Where's the solutions? Where's the cloud system? A case study of where we've actually been successful on microneedles. So we did put a bit of a landing page about that this week as well, which is kind of, ZP, I feel like, there's two types of technologies. In vitro diagnostics, take a sample, test it, get a result. And then wearables, where you put the sensor on or in a situation and you continually measure the analyte in that situation. I always tell people continuous monitoring of a situation is 10 times more complex than just doing one discrete measurement on a sample, for example. Because we do these monthly webinars, we do quite monthly webinars, or quite big monthly webinars these days. I realize we've put a new one into the portfolio because I realize that there is a group of people who do listen to us who are purely interested in the academic side of the kind of workflow. Now at ZP, we kind of see ourselves as the translation part, where we take technology that's quite deep in terms of, it resides at universities, and we translate it into tangible products. But that said, it does mean we do know a lot of academia, so we're going to start holding webinars specifically for our academic colleagues, and there will be the first one of those on the 24th of April, one in the morning, one in the afternoon. Why? Because the one in the morning works well for some parts of the globe, and the one in the afternoon works well for the other parts of the globe. Something else as well that I realize that when people are something I'm very interested in is startups. And unfortunately, the big thing with startups is that the rate of success is really low. I mean, if you told anyone that your chances of passing an exam are sort of 10%, they would be like, oh, it's not worth bothering. I actually realized that the kind of rate of success is kind of the rate of success that when people try out for elite military groups, then, you know, the attrition rate is like 90%. Well, it's like that in startup world as well, that people's chance of success is 10% and obviously 90% therefore fail. And I would actually argue that it's better to be lean. Lean means you spend money when you need to spend money, but you don't spend money all of the time, and that means that you actually do a lot of outsourcing. So I did write a bit of a blog item about that, and obviously, you know, I'm always candid about this, you know, because we obviously have the Sensi All platform, but we generally think the Sensi All platform can get people to market super quick, as opposed to kind of failing very slowly, very expensively over several years. And we are doing, we did have a webinar just this week. In fact, we always do a webinar on Sensi All at the end of the month. We did do a webinar and we did discuss the multi-analyte capabilities of that particular technology. We did do a webinar this morning, in fact, and it was quite nice because there was only 2 questions, one on lactate sensing and one on in vitro diagnostics. But the nice thing about doing these webinars is you sort of really read the questions and then you get to the point, to the heart of what's going on here. What's different about the Zimmer and Peacock is somebody says to us, I need this, and this. Well, so, you know, I need a low cost in vitro diagnostics on a gold electrodes, and it has to be customized. I need calibration and normalization. And then you actually, there's a whole bunch of assumptions stacked upon one another there. And it all starts off with, you know, everyone needs a low-cost IVD. So the first thing about low-cost IVD is it's probably have to be carbon rather than gold. You can't use high-resolution manufacturing techniques where you're making 100 micrometer electrodes because, in fact, you're going to get poor yield. So your first requirement is then at odds with the other requirements then that you sort of put onto it. I think the only requirement you should tell ZP is I need a low-cost IVD. From the rest of that, then you start with that point, and then we can work the rest of it out from there. We did have a FoodSense, or rather, we are having FoodSense live webinars in April. So every month or every week, rather, we do a Q&A webinar on FoodSense. It's kind of just to demonstrate to people that, you know, FoodSense is alive and kicking, and that, you know, there's always questions coming in. We're happy to answer those questions, and we do them in a weekly webinar. Just something that I did with Madalex this week. Madalex is our representative in France, and we did have a quick discussion with them about micro electrodes this week as well, which is actually interesting because it's quite easy to make a micro electrode when you're using things like platinum wires, but it's quite hard to make micro electrodes when you're trying to sputter or blate things like gold and platinum. So it just made me think that, yeah, we were talking about microelectrodes this week, but we were talking about making microelectrodes of 50 micrometers in a different manner to the way that was being asked for by our questioner who's asking about low-cost IVDs. As I said, we did cover cyclovoltammetric stripping this week in a webinar, and it's not something I've talked about a lot, but you can use it to determine copper concentration in baths. You can look at the rate of copper deposition, and you can also determine the effects of levelers, accelerators, and inhibitors. Quite pleased because I wrote these notes, didn't read anything on the web. I realized I just knew it, which is, I think when you've been doing electrochemistry and applications of electrochemistry for several years, then you sort of find out that actually you just retain a lot, which is, you know, kind of nice. But we are having our webinars on FoodSense, as I say, every month. And in fact, we are having a special webinar on the 3rd of April. And then I'm actually going to talk about ginger a little bit more. So we do, on the FoodSense, we do mostly chili these days, followed by ginger, and then followed by total antioxidative capacity. But Shogal is a particular molecule that's found in ginger. It's part of the sort of pungency or taste profile of ginger. We will talk about that this week. So with that, I will wrap up. I feel like it's certainly technically been a very intense week. But like I say, if you've ever got any questions on ZP, don't hesitate to reach out to us. I mean, I think we always give a very fair answer. Somebody was asking, about blood glucose meters this week. And I just said, look, it's very commercialized. Commoditized. And when something becomes commoditized, it basically means there's lots of people who are able to do this. They'll all compete on price, and therefore it wasn't super useful to try and get ZP involved, because at ZP, I think we're best suited for stuff that's difficult, something that's much more cutting edge than necessarily just doing blood glucose measurements. But we will do blood glucose measurements if it's part of a kind of panel, etc. But just making another blood glucose meter. I started my career in 2000 at Abbott making blood glucose meters. So, and I was at the tail end of the blood glucose world, and that's so that's been 23 years. I mean, it really started in the 80s. So, this is a technology that's very mature these days. Okay, so if you have any questions of ZP, don't hesitate to reach out to us. Okay, thanks very much.